Hello. Hello, hello. Ladies and gentlemen, may I invite you to take your seats. We will be starting in less than a minute. Thank you.
Yes, but I'm with Mark.
it's la comunidad. We've got to. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, welcome to our session on Nature Finance, the Next Wave. I'm Mark Halley, and I will be a co-moderator today. And my co-moderator is?
Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Dr. Vian Sharif, and I'm very happy to be here with you today and welcome you to this launch of Nature Finance.
We are also welcoming those who are following us on live stream, and I hope that you will find it a stimulating session. Before we start, let me just point to the partners that we have up on screen. E4S, WBCSD, the Green Digital Finance Alliance, and Sustainable Finance Geneva. We thank you for joining us in this session. Now, I gave you the name of the session, Nature Finance, the Next Wave, and I invite you to note that there's no question mark at the end of it. A couple of years ago, there would have been. Maybe even last year, there would have been. But I think what we've seen already from the Building Bridges program so far is that nature is here, it's all over the place, it's here to stay. And what we would like to do today is two things. First, to give a sense of the energy, the vibrancy, the innovation that is being displayed at this interface between nature and finance. And then to welcome a new member of the Geneva community, Nature Finance, which will be launching during this ceremony. Vian.
Thank you, Mark. By the end of our session today, you will have heard from people who are shaping policy, who are implementing the governance around this new and accelerated demand for our understanding around nature and how we govern these new markets. And there really is an urgency here. We're going to start to see this explode over the next couple of years. And so, without further ado, we have a packed agenda for you today. And I'd like to introduce you to Simon Zadek, the Executive Director of Nature Finance, to open this session for you today.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much indeed. Welcome to everybody. It's a big room, and actually you're filling it really, really nicely. So Mark stole my first line, which was I was actually going to say, given what's happened here in the last couple of days, I'm not even sure we need this event right now. And I don't mean to cancel it. It was just sort of more, really the entire of Building Bridges has been about nature and finance. And so in a way, this is the sort of cherry on the cake. And for those of you who were here last year or the year before, you know, nature was sort of creeping its way into the conversation. But really, it's not a next wave. You know, we're all pretty much soaking wet by now. So welcome. And I do have some slides which I'm going to run through. And I've got this ticker time going on, which I'm going to try and stick to. So the next wave, or maybe this wave, as we say, kind of what's really going on. You know, if you've been paying attention at all over the last couple of days, you know, this is an easy slide to offer, which is there's an awful lot of stuff that isn't really working well. You really don't want to think about climate separately from nature. You know, these messages all should seem completely clear-cut to you by now. And so there are lots of other numbers you could add to that if you wanted to be. And I guess the question is sort of what's nature finance? And I sort of woke up this morning thinking, well, nature is everything, and so finance is everything else. And that didn't quite make sense to me, but this sort of somewhere kind of does make sense to me. So nature is sort of the foundation of everything, and everything in the global economy and us. And finance has that other sort of living characteristic in a way. It's sort of the lifeblood of our global economy. It makes everything move in the global economy. And so really, nature finance isn't just about something narrow called nature or something narrow called finance. It really is the main show. Yeah, it really is about how we connect the global economy and the way it functions and the way it's financed, you know, with the world around us that we need to live in, hopefully, for many generations to come. So this is sort of the topic, if you like, that we need to think about. And there are many, many ways of thinking about nature finance, and as Vienna's already said, we're going to hear about some of those over the next 85 minutes or so. There are clearly lots of ways of thinking about it, lots of actors involved, lots of potential solutions, and we've heard a lot about them over the last 2 days, a few more to kind of come over the rest of this session. Kind of, what's the boring bit? For those of you who are interested in the sort of geeky end of the story, the work of the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosure, the emerging work that the network on central banks, greening the financial system, all sort of beginning to figure out how do we think about nature dependency, how do we think about impact and the way that feeds back into risk, you know, how do we kind of get this into some sort of order that we're able to codify and scale in the way in which we think about investment models, the way in which we think about business models, the way we think about markets, and the way we think about governance. This is just one example out of many. It sort of illustrates kind of some of the moving parts that every business and every financial institution should now be on, and if they're not on today, they will be within a few months or a few days, or perhaps for the laggards, a few years. It's every part of the financial system. Back at the beginning of the pandemic, Finance for Biodiversity, so the predecessor for nature finance, began working on sovereign debt, asking the question, how do we ensure that natural capital is really embedded into sovereign debt markets? The largest, if you like, part of our global financial system, depending on how you measure it. Yeah, and we began to work on nature performance bonds, and then folks from the climate space were more and more interested in how KPIs, sovereign debt instruments, could work. Yeah, and you begin to sort of see that virtuous circle of, yeah, how do you link KPIs to sovereign debt instruments? How do you get nature and climate outcomes? How do those nature and climate outcomes feed back into greater resilience and productivity of the economy? How does that drive down sovereign risk pricing? How does that reduce debt servicing, particularly today, where many developing countries, and indeed increasingly developed countries, are faced with many challenges in servicing their debt? And sort of right at the other end of the story. So we've got the sort of geeky data, all of that stuff. You know, we've got financial innovation things like the sovereign debt stuff I've just talked about and many other areas. And then you've got sort of the rule of law, and you've got financial regulation, and you've got standards. Nature crime, $280 billion more or less, the fourth largest source of illicit financial flows in the world. You know, we can think about the sort of negative side of the story and sort of think, well, how do we get the anti-money laundering community, the financial crime folks, the Interpols of this world, you know, the financial regulators to begin thinking about how the investment community can really begin to spot where those nature crimes are in their value chains and then to move on and start to clear them out of their value chains. Absolutely not the situation today. Kind of last bit of the story, if you like, nature markets. You know, nature is everything in markets, but if nature begins to be crystallized in the way that it's valued and traded explicitly, then we have nature markets specifically. And the Task Force on Nature Markets has been looking at how the emergence of nature markets from new generation of biodiversity credit markets to actually existing large-scale commodity markets for food and minerals really need to be thought about through a nature-positive, equitable lens going forward. So just to conclude, if you like, lots of ways to conclude, lots more to come over the next 90 minutes. You know, nature's the secret sauce. It's the kind of thing that makes it all work. It's just that we haven't counted it in the past. It's exploited, it's deteriorating, and clearly that's not where we need to go. We need to crystallize our understanding of nature, really value it in the right way. We need to pile it into financial and market innovation. And we also need to think about how a new generation of governance is really going to help us shape a global economy that is nature positive and equitable. And I hope that gives us a sort of kicker off for the session, and I will pass back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Simon. We said that the nature wave has arrived. It's broken. We are swimming in it. One of the purposes of our program is to give you a sense of excitement, that it's not just a difficult problem that we need to deal with and incorporate into our financial system, but it is actually also an extremely exciting field that's developing very, very fast, and where there is a great deal of innovation coming on stream. And to give us an example of that, I'm happy to welcome Katrina Donaghy, the CEO of Civic Leisure in Australia. Thanks for staying up in the evening to join us in Australia. Katrina is going to give an example of how technology, and specifically the use of blockchain, can help create new nature-related markets. Katrina, over to you.
Thank you, and thank you, Simon, for your opening discussion. So, as mentioned, my name is Katrina. I'm from Civic Leisure, and I'm calling in all the way from Australia. So I'd like to start my presentation, if I may. So first slide, please. So one of the most important things that we do in Australia is that we do the acknowledgement of country. So Civic Leisure would like to acknowledge the traditional owners to which the land to which I am speaking today. I'd like to acknowledge the elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge the beautiful and rich diversity and science and entrepreneurship that they've bestowed upon the country to which I live. Next slide, please. So the work that Civic Leisure does, we work in water markets. The primary purpose of water market is to facilitate the efficient allocation of water resources and provide a clear measure of the value of water to incentivise conservation. Water markets have historically been complicated economic policy instruments to implement. Next slide, please. Whilst water markets are complex, we believe that they don't have to be complicated. To start, we need to reimagine the way water markets today are governed. We need to move them from centralised governance, which are designed by governments and regulators, which are involved with control and predictability on the way the market operates, whereby in Australia, water markets, for example, are not a financial product, rather an adjunct to water resource management. We need to move the dial and move to a decentralised governance model where we design water markets at place, with water markets participants at the centre and control over their data. We call these decentralised community water exchanges, whereby they are governed by the market participants in place. Next slide, please. Technology and innovation to reimagine the way water markets are governed is key. Reimagining water as a digital asset through tokenisation, water accounting is transformed as water cannot be double spent. Water market rules are known to all market participants, and complex rules are coded for automation, delivering a water market that is compliant by design, enforcing the sustainable yield of all water resource systems. Next slide, please. The work that we do, we have tangible use cases where we are moving across the planet where we can actually implement the concepts of technology and innovation. One use case that we're working on is in California, where we're actually designing water conservation certificate marketplaces, working with Common Good Water, Netafim, and alfalfa farmers. The problem that we're solving is how to solve the problem of water scarcity on one side, but also how do we help corporates to be water net positive? By bringing market mechanisms into play to incentivise alfalfa farmers to reduce irrigation water use by moving from flat irrigation to drip irrigation, we also help corporations become water net positive. And therefore, we're able to measure the value of water saved. Next slide, please. By bringing together an ecosystem, industry, farmers, corporates, business models are reimagined without the need of governments. We're able to measure social value, environmental value, and economic value. Our role is to ledger water volumes saved over time to create a transparent and immutable history to bring confidence to transacting parties. Next slide, please. In my own country, in Australia, we have this concept called Northern Australia. And the problem that we're solving is investor confidence. Northern Australia is an emerging economic driver, however, it lacks water security. We're designing the digital infrastructure to support the emerging next generation water markets, which are informed by the theory of change, where we're actually trying to work out, and through the theory of change, how we move from current state to future state. And we're using design principles in our technology platforms such as open source, interoperability, agnostic taxonomy, privacy and security, consent in the data, ensuring that it's irrigator-led. And the most important thing in our country, in Australia, is understanding the true value of cultural water, both from a cultural perspective, but also an economic perspective. Next slide, please. And this is Joe, a mango farmer in North Queensland, where the Great Barrier Reef, presenting our water ledger solution to irrigators. Joe is an advocate of our work. Joe is also a farmer, and he also understands blockchain technology. One of the lessons that we've learned over time, over the years that we've been working in the industry, is do not underestimate the knowledge and the power of irrigators and farmers. They do understand technology. They do understand that we need to redesign markets of the future. They're willing participants in this, but we need to remember that when we design markets of the future, they must be at the centre of these markets. Next slide, please. So I'm delighted to say that Fraser, the person I work with, he's actually in Geneva today. He's not in the audience today because he's in a prior meeting, but Fraser and I have been working together for so many years. Even when blockchain technology was met with a confused look or wavered away as something to be feared. In Australia, the Reserve Bank of Australia is now exploring the potential benefits of a central bank digital currency to solve the problem of counterparty risk in the clearance and settlement process, which is evident in water markets as water, payments, and title do not move at the same time. I invite, because I can't be there today, but I invite you to speak with Fraser to learn more about our work here in Australia, in the USA and South Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Katrina. Yours is a very exciting example of some of the solutions that are not only being developed but are already out there and available to us. And I think if we approach the nature finance interface as a land of opportunity, we will find many, many more like that. Now, I hope that Patrick Audier has... please, would Patrick Audier and Hannah Jones come up to the podium?
Hannah, I think we will have you up then, and we'll do a slight... Are we... No. I think Patrick's just arrived. Just in time. Over to you.
Okay. Merci. Excellent timing. I'm absolutely delighted to introduce two absolutely extraordinary people. To my right, Patrick Audier, who's probably the busiest man in this building this week. He is the chairman of the Building Bridges conference, but he's also the chairman of Sustainable Swiss Finance, the largest association in Switzerland on the topic. Hannah Jones is the CEO of the Earthshot Prize, comes from a background looking after sustainability in the Nike Corporation. And what we are going to do in this session is to begin to ask ourselves the hard question. We are convinced that nature and finance need to come into alignment. And we are convinced that that has to happen quite quickly. But stepping back and asking ourselves, how realistic is it to move to that kind of alignment with the speed and at the scale that's needed to address the nature challenges that are out there? Patrick Audier, in addition to the titles that I have attributed to him, is the managing partner of Lombard Odier Bank. It's a bank that has made a very public commitment to sustainable finance and that is addressing the question of the nature finance interface very directly. So Patrick, I would like, from your own experience and your own ideas and what you've seen around here and the inspiration you've received, to tell us, is it realistic to think that we can move quickly across that transition to a point where nature and finance are substantially aligned?
First of all, thank you very much for allowing me to speak about the substance for a while during this week. I think it is clear that what has been already done in the field of climate will facilitate the acceleration of the involvement of the financial sector into the nature space. A lot of the approaches had to do with sensibilizing, of course, investors and capital providers, intermediaries, about the issue that not only risks have to be better managed, and in this respect, nature risks are, of course, of the essence, but also investment opportunities are vast and extremely important and nearly unlimited. So in this respect, I think that the distance has been actually reduced in the last few years, thanks to the experience that we all collectively had in discussing issues relating to climate. Of course, now we need to get to grip with the targets, the methodologies, and perhaps also some concepts such as valuating nature at its just level to make sure that the positive externality that it represents is correctly priced. And so if we are able to tackle those three issues, and I think some of the big conferences and the best brains in this world are working on it, like the ones that are trying to make of the COP15 a success in this respect, I think we will get very close to a very swift start of finance being really correctly and rapidly involved into nature-based solution. Perhaps a last comment on this, which has to do with the fact that, as you rightly said, climate and nature are intimately linked. You all know that. But finance, climate, and nature are already intimately linked, simply by the fact that if we all agree about the net zero commitments and objectives, we may disagree from time to time, but globally speaking, it means that some of the solutions that would be needed, in particular to bridge the last gap of that net zero commitment, will have precisely to do with utilizing correctly nature-based solutions. And that's where I see the huge potential coming up in the next few years.
Thank you very much, Patrick. So what you're saying, and I think is also well illustrated by this week's events, is that the toolbox is more and more complete. We have the methodologies, the approaches, the processes needed to bring nature much more into alignment with finance, and that our job is to speed that up. Now, Hannah, you come from a slightly different standpoint on that, in that you are, if you like, listening to the base, listening to the emerging generations, looking very specifically for the types of innovations that can be brought out and accelerated.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, maybe I'll start with a question for everybody. How many of you were investors in Airbnb when it was Series A? How many of you wish you had been? Okay, hold on to your hats, because this is what we're looking at. All innovation lives out in the desert, gets rocks thrown at it. You're told you're ridiculous and you're laughed at. And then when you become mainstream, people say it was their idea. This is what we're all going to experience happening here. I live in the Earthshot Prize, and every day we receive nominations for amazing solutions that, if scaled, could be transformative for oceans, for nature, for waste, clean air, and climate change. I'm glad to say that nature-based financial mechanisms and nature-based solutions are a key priority area for us. And when you look at those nominations, what you see bubbling beneath the surface is not a wave, but a tsunami of problem solvers who are busy fixing the problem and inventing new ways to solve what we know needs to be solved. So, Buckminster Fuller, who is famous to some of us, once said, the future is here, it's just not distributed equally. And I think that the fact that this conference is happening is a real indicator that it's not about the why any longer, but about the how. And what I can tell you from sitting in the Earthshot Prize is we are seeing innovation happening all over the world. And it's happening in the for-profit startups, it's happening in the not-for-profits, it's happening in government and cities. Last year we awarded Costa Rica the prize because of the innovative work they're doing on biodiversity. And if you look, you can see that this wave is about to capitalize on the increasingly favorable sort of regulatory financial mechanisms, because every constraint is an entrepreneur's dream. So we're incredibly excited about it, and we're excited to work with you all on it.
Thank you. So I hear you're saying that we need to build better bridges between this amazing world of innovation and the world of finance that's trying to come to grips with these extraordinary challenges, but also extraordinary opportunities. So, Hannah, what message would you give to the finance sector about where they should place their priority?
Well, I come at it from a background around corporate change, entrepreneurship, innovation, and growth. And my observation is we don't have an innovation problem, we have a scale problem. And that is what we're trying to help solve at the Earthshot Prize, is yes, we're identifying, scouring the earth for innovation, but what we need to do a better job of is to connect the innovative solutions with the right blended capital and in-kind support. Let me give you an example. Solar panels, to go from R&D to scale, has taken us about 70 years. We do not have 70 years. So we have to break some rules and make new rules that bring these communities together and enable an innovation pipeline to go faster and reduce the friction of what it takes to go from an idea in a garage to a working prototype to being scaled and replicated around the world.
And Patrick, how would you build the bridge over to this amazing innovation community that's producing lots of solutions, but that requires finance to go to scale?
Two ways. I think one is to agree about what transition we're talking about, what is the issue to tackle first. And if we agree about that, as I would think, for instance, today there are probably three main areas where everyone should really put its efforts, which is the area of energy supply, energy creation, the area of land usage, forestry, and perhaps agriculture, and the area of materials that we will continue to use, whereas some of them are creating huge damages. If we agree on those issues, then very, very quickly we'll get to nature-based solutions for those three areas. And bridging this global approach about the transition, which involves not only the private sector innovative potential, but also the policymaking and the corporate sector action, if we bridge that with this understanding that science is going to help us even accentuate in the future, I think we will have a really strong basis to make sure that nature-based solutions can be the next big subject for finance to be involved in.
Thank you. Thank you both for a very optimistic message, and we will continue to build and strengthen those bridges and ensure that the traffic across it is very heavy. With that, I will cede the floor to Vian, and thank you both very much for your work.
So everyone, from breaking old rules and making new ones to remembering some of our most ancient, it is my absolute privilege to introduce to you the voice of our next speaker. It turns out that I actually had the privilege of living with Indigenous tribes near her, and it changed my entire life. We have so much to remember. Our precious biodiversity is caretaken by Indigenous communities, and so how important are their voices in these conversations as we build new markets? So it's my honor to invite to the stage Njinga Bandera, co-founder of the Candide Ethno-Environmental Defense Association, to come up onto the stage and to speak.
Canatenga, bonjour. Viajei por mais de 30 horas de Rondônia, que é na parte brasileira da Amazônia, até aqui, até Geneva, porque o setor financeiro e seus investimentos desempenham e continuarão a desempenhar um papel crítico na formação e determinação do futuro do clima, da natureza e das pessoas. Minha filha, o Alela Roiquim, Paité Suruí, e eu investimos nosso tempo, experiência, vida, para contribuir com a manutenção da floresta amazônica, para que ela permaneça em pé, e com as comunidades indígenas e as florestas vivas, e a promoção do que vocês chamam de natureza positiva. Eu moro em um canto da floresta amazônica, que é a maior floresta tropical do planeta, que se espalha por 9 países, na América do Sul. Ela produz água, serviços ecossistêmicos, contribui para o controle climático, a produção agrícola e a maior parte da energia desenvolvida no Brasil, que dependem da floresta amazônica. No entanto, a taxa de desmatamento é a maior nos últimos 15 anos. Esse recorde foi impulsionado pela mineração ilegal do ouro, grilagem de terra, exploração de madeira ilegal e o avanço da produção da carne e grãos, sem respeito à natureza e outros crimes contra a natureza. Intencionalmente ou involuntariamente, o setor financeiro está frequentemente ligado ao crime e à destruição. Quem financia a derrubada da floresta amazônica de forma criminosa? Quem está pagando pelos tratores, pelo combustível e pelos trabalhadores que derrubam a floresta amazônica? Como pode ser que destruir a floresta seja mais barato do que mantê-la viva? E o mais importante, como cada um que aqui está, como que o setor financeiro pode mudar isso? A ignorância hoje não é uma opção. Precisamos garantir que o seu dinheiro e o seu investimento estejam a serviço do futuro e não contra ele. Minha filha, a Chay Suruí, que é produtora do filme O Território, que será exibido hoje à noite aqui neste evento, ela conta essa complexa história, acompanhando a comunidade indígena Uruê-Uauau e sua luta para proteger as terras na floresta amazônica. Sim, os povos indígenas estão usando o entretenimento e a cultura para mobilizar as pessoas e conscientizar os consumidores de que a nossa escolha faz diferença. Minha outra filha, Kim, aqui presente, está liderando a mobilização da juventude indígena em Rondônia, com o auxílio de celular, drones e mídias digitais. Eles usam a tecnologia para denunciar e expor ilegalidades. Viemos aqui com um convite, uma proposta de investimento, lograr o compromisso do setor financeiro com um futuro que seja positivo, justo para a natureza, e um futuro que invista em uma sociobioeconomia que promova o desenvolvimento de produtos da floresta, conhecimento e tecnologia, ao mesmo tempo que contribua para a nossa educação, sistema de saúde e preservação da cultura dos povos da floresta. Como podemos atrair a atenção de vocês para o investimento na sociobioeconomia da Amazônia, da África Central e do Sudeste Asiático? Como podemos contar com vocês para financiar projetos agroflorestais ou investir em restauração, mapeamento da biodiversidade ou crédito da natureza? Instituições financeiras e governo devem promover um ambiente de investimento inclusivo, onde comunidades florestais e povos indígenas possam participar de um futuro sustentável, justo e próspero, compartilhando sua cultura e desenvolvendo novos projetos. Nossos esforços para proteger nossa terra promover o desenvolvimento sustentável e expor crimes contra a natureza nos colocam sob ameaça de morte, assédio constante e preconceito, por ataque de setores empresariais ligados à carne, grãos e políticos irresponsáveis, que são responsáveis pelas invasões das áreas protegidas e terra indígena na Amazônia. Viemos aqui para aprender e buscar orientação sobre como as finanças sustentáveis podem nos ajudar a mudar essa realidade. Queremos ouvir vocês. Queremos nos relacionar com vocês. Mas também viemos dizer a vocês que investir na floresta em pé é o melhor negócio, porque gera lucro para o empresário, renda para as comunidades e mantém o clima equilibrado. A sociobioeconomia é uma alternativa para conter as emergências climáticas, mas também para estimular que o setor privado cumpra com a sua missão de um planeta sadio e uma sociedade sustentável. Agradecemos o convite para estarmos aqui. Sou grata pela oportunidade de compartilhar nossos pensamentos com vocês e reforçar nossos apelos por ideais, insight e investimento que foquem em um futuro positivo para o clima e a natureza e as pessoas. Merci beaucoup, thank you very much, e até chité.
Incredibly powerful. Thank you so much, Najima. And you saw that there is a screening of the territory tonight to which you're all invited in room B. It starts at 6 o'clock. Please do join us. So, moving on to our next panel. I'd like to invite to the stage our panelists, Pierre Bardot, Director of the Nature Asset Team at UNCDF, Emmerich Kapenu, Partner at Southbridge, and Nakul Saran, an entrepreneur, advocate, and oceanographer. Welcome to the stage. So as our panelists take their seats, our discussion today is about new ways of engaging finance and shaping the sorts of markets that we need to deliver these nature-positive outcomes, these equitable outcomes. So welcome, everybody. So let's start with you, Pierre. Working within a hybrid development organization and finance institution, which is quite a thing, you have a unique perspective on how we can start to unlock nature-positive investment. Could you share with us the sorts of innovative solutions that are being developed that you think can achieve this transformational effect on communities and nature-positive outcomes?
Thank you. First, congratulations for launching the Nature Finance. I think at UNCDF we are very pleased to collaborate with you. We're actually in the process of setting up the Nature Asset Team in Geneva, which will look at supporting green and blue economy business model, which can generate conservation impact. We aim to support this transition of supporting this shift of viewing nature as a resources towards valuing nature as an asset. We work on, I will give you two models of the financial innovation we are supporting. The first one is the Global Fund for Coral Reef, which is a fund that we've structured 2 years ago. It's a blended finance instrument that supports coral ecosystems. It's a 700 million trust fund, UN trust fund, with a large coalition of partners. We have 500 million equity fund and a 200 million grant fund. The grant fund is supporting the acceleration of reef-positive business model, technical assistance, monitoring and evaluation of our impact. Sorry, I'm a bit jet lagged. The second model is on forest performance bond and forest conservation. This is something we are trying to structure to leverage impact investment at scale in forest-positive business model. A second component is structuring an underlying portfolio by supporting local investment manager, mainly in Central Africa.
I mean, your jet lag, I think, speaks to the point. We're seeing demand for these solutions. We're seeing people needing to be who are experts in these fields everywhere. I don't know if you've witnessed this over your time.
Yeah, the demand is really growing, and we see in the UN a lot of those new initiatives coming up. And we believe that in the next few years, that's the direction we need to take. Engage the UN system in supporting private investors coming into that field, raise the right grant funding to de-risk their investment, create pathway for those investments, and blueprints and models that can be replicated. And I think this is something new. We are very happy in the UN to support this transition and create dedicated structure that will be available for the partners like Nature Finance in growing that space. And I think the most important challenge that we see today is that we are able to mobilize public funding. We are able to mobilize private foundation. Like, for example, the Global Fund for Coral Reef has mobilized 200 million the first 2 years. with member states and private foundations, but we are struggling bringing impact investors, even if we have 200 million of grants that they risk the fund. We are still at that stage where it's extremely difficult to bring in impact investors.
Fascinating insights and such an important part of this ecosystem. Thank you. I'm going to turn perhaps to you, Amrik, now. Tell us a little bit about client demand. Are clients asking for nature-positive outcomes? And again, how do you see novel ways of building these pipelines, specifically perhaps into one of our most important regions, Africa?
Thank you very much for inviting me. I represent Southbridge Group. And after I've seen what our colleagues have just expressed on the Amazonian forest, I can say that the next one is Africa. And in Africa, we are looking at nature-based solution. And the question is, why is it nature-based solution becoming a very big, important topic? Is because we have the carbon credit, which is in demand in the West by a lot of the companies to offset their greenhouse gas emission. But to develop a carbon credit solution, we need to make sure that the local communities are participating in the work, the help, and the engagement. Now what we see is if you start with a project and the project doesn't include the local community, there's very little chance today that the project will see the light. And the reason being is that nature-based solution is the next big development to help the companies attain their net zero solution. So what we do is we select projects on the basis of the community's involvement and the community's engagement. Then we ramp up the project by speaking to investor who has an interest to see a nature solution being developed in the region. To give you an example, in the basin of Congo, there is a lot of reforestation projects which have started. And it does work by bringing different layer of investment, as we just seen, a blending finance to help kickstart the project. The big difficulty and the big challenge is the scalability, because finance usually like big projects. So that's where we have to work together to make sure that we bring different type of investors and different type of financing to make sure that the project gets through. Thank you.
Amrik, thank you. A very practical take on what it's going to take to make this happen. Thank you. So now, Nakul, entrepreneur, oceanographer, you have a broad understanding of how some of these innovations could come together. Tell us, what is the potential that technology has to relieve pressure on our natural resources and ecosystems? Your reflections.
Thanks, Fian. So I think it is a broad topic. So, I'd say there are three sort of waves of technology and technology's involvement in nature finance and nature markets. One is technology as an enabler, which sort of Simon referred to in his opening remarks. Everything from technology playing a role in sensing and being able to understand what's happening in our natural environment, being able to do mapping of biodiversity. You think about new technologies such as eDNA, looking at technologies such as balloons for observation, which are now allowing us to create really high-resolution mapping and monitoring and verification of natural assets, which then plays, I think, a really important role in thinking about the equity in pricing of these markets. Right? If you look at carbon credits today, why is it that a carbon credit in Europe is worth 100 tons and a carbon credit in the Amazon is worth $5 a ton? Right? Those kinds of discrepancies are accounted for in one level because of regulation, but it's also because of what is considered to be the quality of the credit. But if we can start to eliminate some of those issues, I think that creates a really great balancing role in how we think about the role technology can play in creating equity. But it can also play a really incredible role in equity also when we think about governance. We talk about the rights of nature. How do you incorporate the rights of nature into contracts? Can blockchain and smart contracts ensure that natural rights, natural asset rights are also implicitly embedded within any of these contracts that we're talking about. Also thinking about the rights of local communities. I think at the end of the day, technology really will only matter if we can actually get local communities, local governance units to actually be able to use and embrace these technologies. And so being able to do that means equipping these communities with technologies that are practical and useful to actually empower them in these transactions, empower them in the enforcement. What are the roles that technology can play there, I think become really interesting. But that's, in my mind, one wave. There's a second, which is technology in helping to play a role in restoration. So, working with a company that's looking at how do we build robots to actually start replanting coral reefs, right? There's this whole other wave of technology being an enabler in restoration. But I think the third one, which is what I would argue is sort of, the fifth industrial revolution that's needed, is the merging of technology and nature. So we're already talking a lot about alternative proteins, but can we actually start to think about, taking that even further, lab-grown materials, right, as a way to actually start to reduce pressure on natural environments and natural ecosystems. But they raise their own questions around equity. Who owns the genetic material on which we manufacture this material? Who makes sure that if we're going to move to lab-grown cotton, as I'm working in the world of fashion now, what happens to the millions of cotton farmers off the back of whom the fashion industry was built? So how do we think about just transitions that are also going to be critically important when we think about technology as an enabler?
Thank you. Hugely important points. Now,
Sure.
Before we close out the panel, I will also like to invite a couple of respondents from the floor to give some comment. So, Dominic Warre is advisor to the CEO of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. Dominic, can I ask you to come up and give a few reflections on what you've heard?
Indeed, it's a real pleasure to be here. And can I just absolutely kind of applaud the launch of Nature Finance in terms of today's Building Bridges event. I think the combination of the topic that we're hearing about, including from those who are in the landscapes affected and are looking for that investment, and all the innovation and finance that is available, linked to the topic of building bridges, is absolutely key to what this conference is all about. The demand is there. We experience at the WBCSD, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, about 65 multinational companies who are asking through the TNFD process, the Task Force for Nature-Related Financial Disclosures, how to figure out investment and innovation in key value chains, energy, construction, food and agriculture. And that will be the demand for what Hannah was referring to in terms of all those innovations to invest in those supply chains. And above and beyond that, to look at how even more investment can go into the landscapes that we were hearing about that hit on climate, nature, and people all at the same time. So it's a very, very exciting development. It's a huge market. And we've got to realize with the global biodiversity framework as it comes through towards the end of next month, the financing for that is going to come from innovations like this to the people that we heard from. And that's the key. So thank you very much, and absolutely looking forward to working very closely with the Nature Finance collaboration. And congratulations again on the launch here today at the Building Bridges event. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dominic. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to welcome Tom Crowther to the stage to also reflect back on some of the innovations that he has been seeing. Tom of SEED, an initiative of the Crowther Lab, his own lab.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Is this working? Yeah, here we go. Honestly, as an environmentalist, I could not be more enthusiastic and excited to see all of the developments happening here. Getting the power of financial markets to work in favor of nature is obviously the holy grail. But as a scientist, I hope that we learn from our failures of the past. Obviously, the entire economy is built on nature, but we have inherently valued certain aspects of nature much more highly than everything else. These tend to be the parts that we can eat, that we can get medicines from, or timber, or textiles, or carbon. And when these things become more valuable than everything else, we propagate them at massive scales, at the expense of the countless other species that would naturally survive in those ecosystems. Obviously, when we do that, we lose the resilience and stability of those systems. It is ultimately the biocomplexity across genetic, species, and ecosystem levels that maintains the resilience of ecosystems at a landscape scale and at a planetary scale in order to sustain life on this planet. That's why I'm incredibly excited to see that Nature Finance is building their framework around the concept and the measurement of biocomplexity, so that we can really help markets move in the direction of empowering and enabling the increase of biocomplexity across our planet. Because for the last few hundred years, we have obviously oversimplified the nature on our planet, and it is critical that we reverse this trend to bring back the complexity of nature. Thanks very much.
Tom, thank you. Tom, thank you so much. And I think in our closing remarks now, having heard from innovators, from thinking about how we create these new markets, it would be wonderful to hear from our panelists some reflections on what the practical next steps could be in their area. So help us understand the most exciting thing that you see ahead in a practical way. What can people actually do in your space to facilitate the change that we all want to see?
I think is it working? Yeah. One of the main challenge we have and excitement is how can we transition and get to the point where we can see bankability in nature units. We see it with nature positive businesses. We see pathways in creating portfolio of valuable nature positive business like sustainable palm oil. But when it comes to forest, when it comes to water, it's very difficult to create that bankability. And I think hearing from the innovation that we can bring could be helpful. And then how to aggregate those nature units into larger product, into real forest bond, for example. That's the future that's what really we need to be able to structure for tomorrow.
And if you could have a wish granted that a mechanism was put in place, what could that look like practically?
It's a forest performance bond that will value nature unit as it value nature positive businesses and have a mixed and have financial mechanism at scale that can finance those nature units so that we can protect the Amazons, the trees.
Pierre, thank you very much. Now, cool. How about you? What's the most exciting practical thing that could happen next from your perspective?
So I think on the technology and innovation front, where these innovators are getting their funding from, where these innovations are being incubated, changes the nature of the purpose and outcomes of these innovations. And so I'm excited about work that Earthshot Pride is doing. I'm excited that we're potentially collaborating with Nature Finance, because I think creating homes for where innovators are able to work with like-minded people, like-minded capital, can really change the pathways that these innovations take. And I think the second piece is thinking about the new governance models within which these innovations are built out. So maybe it's not about sort of classic corporate models as we've had today, but really thinking about ways in which this technology can be shared more equitably across different domains becomes really important. So I think those are two areas where I'm particularly interested in.
Thank you very much. Amrik, how about you? In the most practical way possible, what could be the next steps that you're most excited about?
I'm proud to say that we have already selected a few projects in Africa, in 5 countries, Congo, Gabon, Benin, Togo, and Guinea. Those projects are a little bit different because the landscape of Central Africa is different than the landscape of West Africa. And those projects will be funded, and we're looking for further funding. So if there's anybody who wants to be involved and deal with us on the forest bond, as you mentioned, we are very happy to have a discussion. Those are real projects already in action, and we are very proud to partner with you and to see those projects coming through. To give you just one simple example, in Togo, we are working on a reforestation project, which will include agroforestry, carbon generation, and a lot of conservation for nature. So we try to do 3 types of projects and include every equilibrium of the nature to make sure that the equilibrium is respected. So we are very happy to take conversation and speak to people here. So action.
Open for
Thank you very much, everyone.
nature markets are open for business. If we had any doubt that nature markets existed, I think this example helps us to understand all the multifaceted angles that we're taking to start to create this, and the aim of nature finance, the task force for nature markets, TNFD, the movements around this, the importance of those and how we shape those equitably moving forwards. So I'm going to say thank you to our panelists, and I'm going to invite Mark to take the stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, we have laid out, I think, a very rich buffet, and the time has come now to introduce nature finance and to give it its formal launch. And for that, let me invite Simon Zedek to come on stage and formally launch it and issue a call for action. Simon.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. It's this is the pitch moment, right? But actually, I don't think nature finance really needs to be launched because you're kind of here, and you've heard this story. And I don't know about you, but I'm sort of equally sort of shocked, amazed, excited, humbled, really worried, and know that there's an awful lot to be done. And that's not because of nature finance, that's why nature finance exists. Now, I have a confession to make, particularly with Andre sitting down there, which is nature finance gets launched because I and we working in finance for biodiversity broke a promise. Yeah, that when we were first set up with support from Marva Foundation and others, we promised that after 3 years we would close down. And the reason for that was quite simple, which was we saw this incredible need and opportunity during this surge in work around nature and finance to make a difference. But we didn't really want to focus on building an institution. And so the deal was, let's do this for 3 years and then let's shut down. Now, shutting down was meant to happen last Friday. And unfortunately, we never quite got around to it. So we broke that promise. And we broke that promise for all the reasons you've heard about today. And all the reasons actually you've heard about over the last 2 days in this amazing event. Yeah, which is, there is a massive opportunity, but also, as we've heard, there are some massive problems. And the outcome is not guaranteed. Markets can be dynamic and create catastrophe. You know, they can be dynamic and deliver huge public goods and fantastic outcomes that we all share an objective for. And we believe that nature finance can contribute to that with you, you in plural here, and many other partners that we have already developed over the last 3 years. Our mission to align global finance with nature-positive equitable outcomes is kind of obvious in a sense, but not easy, in multiple dimensions, as you've already heard. Yeah, we need to play to the upside of market opportunities, and we need to play to the downside of addressing, for example, issues to do with illegal gold mining in the Amazon and many other areas, you know, where there is a sort of a dark side to the global economy, and we mustn't ignore it. We ignore it at our peril. How do we do that without just sort of becoming another also-ran organization? Well, it's tough. It's mainly to do with people. And we have already an incredible team working with us, an amazing set of partnerships. It's partly to do with our imagination. And I think if there's one thing that you walk out of here today with, it's that nature and human justice, social justice, equity are inextricably linked. You just cannot separate these two things out. In fact, they shouldn't be linearly along a sentence with a comma in between. But these two things are so much the same thing that we mustn't leave the room thinking that this is a green agenda of some kind, because it clearly is not only that. Yeah, our imagination institutionally is that we're creating not a bunch of work programs, but if you like, a sort of flotilla of entities that will have their own entrepreneurial drive in multiple different ways. Tom, on the stage, talking about biocomplexity. We're really pleased to be working with ETH Crowther Lab in taking forward the Biodiversity Index partnership, where we're trying to combine the amazing work that they've done with the sort of the puzzling question of how do you bring an extraordinary way of thinking and measuring biodiversity, crowdsourced from tens of thousands of different actors around the world, to the market in a way that the highest quality metrics can be adopted rather than below the radar, poor quality data, seemingly informing, in fact, what turn out to be our wrong decisions. As Nakul said, what about those early stage companies that are really going to shape future markets? We're really pleased that we're going to take forward this Nature Investor Circle, which brings together, hopefully many, certainly already many involved, early stage investors who are asking, what are the next generation of businesses that are going to shape those nature markets that Vian was talking about? And we already have, we've talked about sovereign debt, we already have a fantastic partnership with a group of large global development finance institutions trying to advance exactly those nature and climate sustainability-linked debt instruments in the context of arguably the most distressed debt situation and potentially poverty catastrophe that has emerged on the back of the pandemic and now the Ukraine war. So these individual entities that will be sort of part of the nature finance ecosystem, but will have their own life, their own leadership, their own way of being led, their own way of being funded, and hopefully will not, in a sense, drive us into mediocrity as we become hopefully more effective at scale, but continue to enable us to drive that innovation, Andre, that you and I and many of us talked about when Finance for Biodiversity was first established. So in short, I think it's fantastic that you're here. I think nature finance already exists. I'm really pleased to be part of it and hugely proud at the folks that are working with nature finance already. Hope that you all will do in the future. Back to you.
Much, Simon. I guess with that we are officially launched, but we still have a number of messages from people who have helped bring this about. And to introduce the first one, I turn over to Vian.
Thank you, everyone. We are in a unique ecosystem here in Geneva. We have some of Geneva's most important voices here, and it brings together a group of individuals, businesses, and market forces that really are very special, and that's been very important to the launch of Nature Finance, too. The message you'll hear today, just now, is from Fabienne Fischer, Geneva State Councillor. And the reason she couldn't be here today is because every Wednesday morning, the weekly cabinet meeting takes place. So there's a 3-line whip on that. So sadly, she couldn't be here with us in person, but she has recorded a message for us now. So.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished friends, thank you very much to the Nature Finance team for having invited me to say a few words on their initiative's official launch at Building Bridges 2022. While it would have been even better to be physically with you this morning, I am pleased to leave you with a few thoughts regarding the challenges and opportunity ahead. As highlighted by the latest United for Science climate change study, which was published just a few days ago, we are unquestionably entering times of catalytic tipping points. As the systemic conditions for our life on Earth are shifting, finance needs to play its part. Different approaches and different leadership need to provide us for a very different focus and a much different impact. In this ambition to shift priorities and to work together in ways we have never before, which is at the heart of Building Bridges. Geneva's positioning as the Center for Multi-Stakeholder Engagement around the Transformation of Finance, is clear evidence of the important role that this unique ecosystem wishes to play in speeding the transformation of finance. Sustainable finance is not just, or principally, channeling more funds into green investments. The challenge is much deeper. How to align the financial system with net zero, nature positive and equitable outcomes at a much faster pace? This is the key question. To contribute to respond to it, the Canton is happy to welcome nature finance as a new and important part of Geneva's sustainable finance ecosystem. While climate finance is now quite well understood and climate risk is increasingly built into financial decision-making, nature finance is a more recent area of focus, but it is emerging and growing very rapidly. In this context, I see the establishment of nature finance in Geneva as a significant opportunity to mainstream the taking into account of nature risk at a faster pace. The stakes are incredibly high and there is no time to lose. In this context, we welcome and share your ambition to make Geneva the global capital of nature finance, and I invite you to mobilize, work, and build on the unique ecosystem of key players in Geneva and more widely in Switzerland in the spirit of building bridges. I do also invite nature finance to ask tough questions to all actors involved in finance, but also in regulation and standard setting. Unless we reform practices and align them with updated rules, the regenerative impact and long-term vision the planet and people desperately need will simply not materialize. I count on nature finance and Geneva to make a real difference on that front. This unique ecosystem has indeed the capacity to contribute significantly to reverse the planetary nature crisis if it works together. In a world where increasingly no single stakeholder is capable of finding the right answer to the enormous challenges ahead, we must act collectively and vigorously to give ourselves a chance to succeed. To restore the natural ecosystem our societies and economies depend upon, sustainability and the generation of positive externalities need to be put at the core of our financial decision-making, with a high degree of urgency. You can count on the full support of the Geneva government in fulfilling your ambitions for this canton, for the planet, and for humanity. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
We're very grateful to State Councillor Fischer for that strong and extremely welcoming message. I think that her message really reflects the spirit in which nature finance wishes to work with the ecosystem, and wishes to take the international side of Geneva and project it around the world. And it's nice to know that in beginning, in launching, we have such strong and unlimited support from somebody so senior in the cantonal government. Nature finance would not have been possible if people hadn't taken early risks on us. Simon mentioned the years where we worked as Finance for Biodiversity, and we worked in a way that enabled us to pick up issues because we were convinced that they were important, and to work with them, draw them out from the woodwork, so to speak, shape them, build an agenda around them. Some of them went forward very vigorously, others didn't, others still adapted. But we're only able to do that because certain people, and one in particular, took a risk in backing this venture. So I'd like to invite André Hoffmann to come up on the stage. He is largely responsible for the support to Finance for Biodiversity and now Nature Finance. And I would invite him to say a few words, please.
Thank you very much, Mark, for these far too kind words. I must admit, I am feeling very emotional today. I think what we're seeing here, this launch of nature finance, is something quite special. And I'd like to sort of take a couple of minutes to explain to you why. About 30 years ago, I more or less at the same time joined two boards. One was the board of WWF International, the World Wildlife Fund, the World Wildlife Fund for Nature. The other one was the board of our family company, Hoffmann La Roche. When I arrived on the board of the company, my first question was, what do we do for nature? What does a company like Roche do for nature? How do we manage our relationship to the planet? And how do we manage our footprint? And the answer was a very clear one. Yes, okay, scratch of head. What do we do now? Okay, let us do money. Let us make money. And once you have the money, we will give you the money for your birds in the Camargue. So nature was really, not in the boardroom. It was somewhere else. And that, the reality that we had to sort of first execute business at the cost of destruction of the planet because of shorter profit maximization was taken into account because we are then going to give this to charity. I don't even say philanthropy, charity. And then I was at the other end at WWF, where we received this money. And this money allowed us to do a lot of things. And then you start asking yourself, well, what's the success model of this sort of endeavor? And the example I like to quote in this is the example of the rhinoceros, the rhinos. The rhinos have been in the threat in East Africa, or now even in Southern Africa, for 60 years. Since 60 years, we raise money at WWF to protect the rhino. Well, why is it still under threat? Obviously, we're not doing the right thing. And so for me, it became rather quickly apparent that if you wanted to bridge the two worlds, you had to do something. And now here we are, building bridges. Thanks to the visionary spirit of Patrick Audier and a couple of other people, we are now able to mix these two worlds. And that is the key to our survival on this planet. Where is what I would call the human journey? What is the journey of the humanity on the planet going to if it is not to sustainable prosperity? If we don't reach sustainable prosperity by putting everybody together, we are doomed. And I think it's important that we should remember that. So I'm extremely excited to be able to announce, to participate to the creation of our new initiative today. I heard we've already received support from other financial institutions like CII, and we have a number of other projects that are going to mature in the near future. So that's a source of excitement because we are changing the rules of the game. We are bringing in new things. Thousands of people here understand the problem of nature finance much better than I do, and I would not even start off to venture into it. All I'm telling you is that if we do not combine the two worlds, the worlds of value creation and the worlds of protecting of the environment, of protecting of our planet, of reconstituting our planet, we will not be able to move away from the polluting and extractive industries model we have to the regenerative model that we need. And so I'm very happy to see this happening. I'm very happy to see that the Canton de Genève is going to be doing this. I think Geneva is a nexus of private investments, public investments, national organizations, NGOs, and the like. And there are not very many places which are better suited for this sort of initiative than this one. So thank you very much for helping us all to come and launch this. Thank you very much for taking the risk that is what's going to make a difference. And have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for your inspiring words, Andre, and I hand over to Vianne for the next step.
Thank you. And what words like Andre's make me remember is that how do we change this world one person at a time? The other part of this evolving nature finance space is the frameworks under which companies are starting to understand how they have an impact on nature. So, for example, we have the EU taxonomy and the associated Sustainable Disclosure Finance Review, the Pledge for Biodiversity, where financial institutions are now having to disclose their impact on nature. This means understanding where their locations are, understanding where the material impacts they have are, and this is transformational. It's accelerated beyond any pace that perhaps we could have imagined, but here we are today in the process of an evolving task force for nature-related disclosures as one of the premier frameworks out there, evolving to help corporates and investors understand in a standardized way their impact on nature. I'm very, very happy to share with you and invite us to watch a message from Elizabeth Maruma Murema, the Executive Secretary of the UNCBD and the co-chair of the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosures, on the data and frameworks necessary to make nature count in finance.
Greetings to you all. I'm delighted to participate in the launch of Nature Finance, even though only virtually. I regret that important prior commitments and preparations for the Conference of the Parties to the Convention prevent me from joining you in person today. With that said, the importance of the financial sector to the successful protection and restoration of nature is at the forefront of our minds. At the 15th Conference of the Parties, parties to the Convention will work towards adopting an ambitious post-2020 global biodiversity framework, including targets on mobilizing resources, financial and otherwise. Some targets focus on closing the gap between available financial resources and other means of implementation, and those necessary to achieve the 2050 vision of living in harmony with nature. With more than half of the world's GDP estimated to be at risk from nature loss, COP15 will be the critical moment in time. And we need to encourage the greening of finance. That is, ensuring that investments and economic activities duly consider biodiversity risks, impacts, and dependencies, while using the best possible alternatives and mitigations to avoid harming nature. This includes redirecting of financial flows that are harmful to biodiversity towards activities that contribute to protecting and restoring nature. The Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosure, which I'm honored to co-chair, has progressed in developing a global, science-based, market-led framework for reporting on nature-related risks, impacts, and opportunities. This will provide a consistent approach for measuring, assessing, reporting on, and managing nature-related risks, impacts, and opportunities. I encourage all market participants to take interest in and support the development and market-wide adoption of the TNFD. As owners and managers of vast amounts of capital worldwide, the financial sector, public and private, is directly exposed to the risks and impacts caused by nature loss on the global economy. Nature finance has the opportunity to advocate for and help develop solutions for a transformation of our economy. I applaud the work nature finance is currently doing to track alignment and provide new and accessible tools as the basis for action to bring about systemic change. We must work together using integrated approaches, aligning our vision, our agenda, and our actions for the benefit of the planet and future generations. Thank you very much.
We thank Elizabeth Mrema for a very inspiring message, and a message that is so aligned with everything that we've heard here today, whether it's coming from the business sector, or NGO sector, from the public government of Geneva. And just to close out our session, I would like to now invite to the podium Christoph Baumann. Christoph is from the Federal Department of Finance in Switzerland. We tend to talk in shorthand of the Geneva ecosystem, but we all know that the ecosystem that we're playing with is broader than that. includes Geneva. We saw from the Crowther Labs that we're already working with the Federal Technical High School in Zurich. And there are many players scattered around Switzerland that need to be part of this venture. So it's my great pleasure to ask Christophe to come up on stage and to give us a few words from the perspective of the federal government of Switzerland.
Mark, thank you so much. Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, it's a pleasure and honor to hold the closing remarks to this wonderful event as a representative of the Swiss government. Now, as you know, Switzerland is the largest center for cross-border wealth management and has a huge insurance sector. As such, we're ideally positioned to support the transition to net zero and to nature positive. And I do hope that by now each policymaker and each financial institution has realized that the loss of biodiversity is, such as climate change, it's on par with that and it's highly interconnected with that. And similar to climate change, the transition to net zero is also full of opportunities for finance. So with International Geneva, Switzerland is home to a unique ecosystem of institutions able to bridge the gap between nature and finance to address these risks and to address these opportunities. We therefore welcome the launch of Nature Finance and support its ambition to make Switzerland the global capital of nature finance. Switzerland, through its economic cooperation and development, is currently in advanced discussions to support financially nature finance, complementary to its support for its continuous support for Encore and its support for TNFD. This work will benefit the close coordination within TNFD. As just mentioned, Switzerland has been an early supporter of the work of TNFD and pushes internationally that TNFD, analogous to TCFD, becomes the basis for future ISSB work focused on biodiversity. And as you may know, this summer the Swiss Federal Council launched the climate scores to really establish science-based transparency on the Paris alignment of financial investments. And I'm very optimistic and I'm really hoping that in a couple of years we're in position to work on the Swiss nature scores. With this, again, I would like to thank everyone that's working so hard in making International Geneva a global capital for nature finance. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Vian, please come back on the stage. We've reached the end of our formal program, and we will be happy to see you all at a lunch that we're serving over in the village area after we close here. But just before we close, let me just underline a point that has been made repeatedly here and that I think is absolutely fundamentally important. If I look around the room, even though it's a little bit dark from this perspective, I see so many people who are working on this agenda, who have something incredibly important to bring, who are innovating, who are connecting, who are networking. And I think that that ecosystem that we keep talking about is the foundation of strength that nature finance wants to build on. And nature finance will use that as a foundation, but it will also operate in a way that tries to mobilize and bring real genuine value to that ecosystem and from that ecosystem to the markets that we're trying to play in. And so when we talk about the Geneva and the wider Swiss ecosystem, we're talking about a group of people who are already engaged in this agenda, who we can bring together to do more than each of us could do individually. And so I am greatly inspired by what I see happening in this area. I'm greatly inspired by the many people who were on stage during Building Bridges Week talking about the work that they were doing, by our partners in this event. We intend to work closely with you in future and build in such a way that it brings value to your work as well, just as you bring value to ours. And with that, let me thank you very much for your attention and turn to Vian.
Thank you, Mark. I will just leave you with two thoughts. One is, I'd like you to remember the last time that you were in nature. For many of us, it catalyzed something that just we couldn't go back on. And now here we are, second thought, in what has been termed a super year for nature. And the reason for that is that not only do we have the Convention on Biodiversity coming up, renegotiating our targets as a global community for the next 20 years. Not only do we have frameworks in place to disclose nature impacts, not only do we have the data in place, not only do we have the finance community engaged, but we have each and every one of you as advocates in this challenge. So it just remains for me to say thank you so much to all of you for being here, to the amazing panelists that we've had, our amazing speakers, to everyone involved in nature finance, including those who made it possible. Thank you very much, and please join us for lunch.